The gavel's echo slices through the Chicago courtroom, each strike a wound in Nia Johnson's heart. At 28, her radiant brown skin and wavy black hair frame a face etched with defiance and dread, as she faces a 5-year prison sentence for crimes she didn't commit. This woman, who saved a billionaire's son, now stands betrayed by a web of lies. Her eyes, fierce yet fragile, hide a truth the jury cannot see. In mere days, a single act of courage will unravel a conspiracy, turning a child's gratitude into her salvation and forging an unlikely family from broken trust. This story of sacrifice and justice will leave you stunned. Drop a comment to share where you're watching from and when. Your voice matters. Subscribe to join our circle for more tales that twist fate and reveal heroes. Chicago, the rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the streets of the South Side into a maze of glistening asphalt and shadow. Nia Johnson, 28, her radiant brown skin catching the faint glow of a flickering street lamp, stood under a tattered awning, her long, wavy black hair clinging to her shoulders. Her breath misted in the cold as she handed out sandwiches to a cluster of shivering children, their faces gaunt with hunger. Nia worked for a nonprofit that fed the city's forgotten youth, and nights like this, when the storm drove even the toughest souls to seek shelter, tested her resolve. Yet her warmth, like a beacon, drew them in. She adjusted her rain-soaked jacket, her dark eyes scanning the alley for stragglers. Then she saw him. A small figure stumbled through the rain, no older than 8, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead, his expensive navy coat torn at the sleeve. He wasn't one of the usual street kids. His sneakers, though muddy, were high-end, and his wide green eyes carried a terror that didn't belong in a child's gaze. Nia's heart clenched. She crouched low, her voice soft but steady. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay? What are you doing out here?" The boy froze, his small frame trembling as he glanced over his shoulder. "They're after me," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain's roar. "Please, don't let them find me." Nia's instincts kicked in, honed from years of working with vulnerable kids. She scanned the street. A black SUV idled at the corner, its headlights slicing through the downpour like a predator's eyes. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her face calm, a mask of reassurance for the boy. "Come with me," she said, extending a hand. "You're safe now." He hesitated, his eyes darting between her and the SUV. Then with a shaky nod, he took her hand, his fingers ice-cold against her warmth. Nia led him to the shelter, a cramped community center with peeling paint and a single flickering bulb. Inside, she wrapped him in a blanket, kneeling to meet his gaze. "What's your name, honey?" "Noah," he said, clutching the blanket. "Noah Bennett." The name hit her like a jolt. Bennett, as in James Bennett, the billionaire tech mogul whose face graced every business magazine in Chicago. This was his son? Nia's mind raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Okay, Noah, tell me what happened." His words tumbled out in fragments. He'd been at a charity gala with his father, slipped out to get some air, and then a man in a black car, yelling, chasing. Noah had run, losing himself in the city's underbelly. He said he'd take me away if I didn't do what he wanted," Noah stammered, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. Nia's jaw tightened. She knew the streets, knew the predators who lurked in them. But a billionaire's son being targeted? This wasn't random. She glanced at the door, half expecting the SUV to roll up. "You're safe here, Noah. I promise." She handed him a cup of hot cocoa, watching as he sipped it, his hands shaking less with each gulp. The shelter's phone rang, shrill against the storm's hum. Nia answered, her voice firm. "Hope Center, this is Nia." She relayed Noah's situation to the police, giving them the address. But something in her gut told her to stay vigilant. She locked the door, dimmed the lights, and sat beside Noah, her presence a quiet shield. "Tell me about your dad," she said, coaxing him to talk, to keep his fear at bay. Noah's eyes softened. "He's busy, always working. Since Mom—" His voice cracked, and Nia understood. The papers had covered James Bennett's tragedy, his wife's death from cancer 2 years ago. Noah was carrying that loss, and now this. "You're brave, Noah," Nia said, brushing a wet strand of hair from his forehead. "Running like that." Most kids wouldn't make it this far. Her words drew a small, proud smile from him, the first crack in his fear. The gavel's echo slices through the Chicago courtroom, each strike a wound in Nia Johnson's heart. At 28, her radiant brown skin and wavy black hair frame a face etched with defiance and dread as she faces a 5-year prison sentence for crimes she didn't commit. This woman, who saved a billionaire's son, now stands betrayed by a web of lies. Her eyes, fierce yet fragile, hide a truth the jury cannot see. In mere days, a single act of courage will unravel a conspiracy, turning a child's gratitude into her salvation and forging an unlikely family from broken trust. This story of sacrifice and justice will leave you stunned. Drop a comment to share where you're watching from and when. Your voice matters. Subscribe to join our circle for more tales that twist fate and reveal heroes. Chicago, the rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the streets of the South Side into a maze of glistening asphalt and shadow. Nia Johnson, 28, her radiant brown skin catching the faint glow of a flickering street lamp, stood under a tattered awning, her long, wavy black hair clinging to her shoulders. Her breath misted in the cold as she handed out sandwiches to a cluster of shivering children, their faces gaunt with hunger. Nia worked for a nonprofit that fed the city's forgotten youth, and nights like this, when the storm drove even the toughest souls to seek shelter, tested her resolve. Yet her warmth, like a beacon, drew them in. She adjusted her rain-soaked jacket, her dark eyes scanning the alley for stragglers. Then she saw him. A small figure stumbled through the rain, no older than 8, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead, his expensive navy coat torn at the sleeve. He wasn't one of the usual street kids. His sneakers, though muddy, were high-end, and his wide green eyes carried a terror that didn't belong in a child's gaze. Nia's heart clenched. She crouched low, her voice soft but steady. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay? What are you doing out here?" The boy froze, his small frame trembling as he glanced over his shoulder. "They're after me," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain's roar. "Please, don't let them find me." Nia's instincts kicked in, honed from years of working with vulnerable kids. She scanned the street. A black SUV idled at the corner, its headlights slicing through the downpour like a predator's eyes. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her face calm, a mask of reassurance for the boy. "Come with me," she said, extending a hand. "You're safe now." He hesitated, his eyes darting between her and the SUV. Then with a shaky nod, he took her hand, his fingers ice-cold against her warmth. Nia led him to the shelter, a cramped community center with peeling paint and a single flickering bulb. Inside, she wrapped him in a blanket, kneeling to meet his gaze. "What's your name, honey?" "Noah," he said, clutching the blanket. "Noah Bennett." The name hit her like a jolt. Bennett, as in James Bennett, the billionaire tech mogul whose face graced every business magazine in Chicago. This was his son? Nia's mind raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Okay, Noah, tell me what happened." His words tumbled out in fragments. He'd been at a charity gala with his father, slipped out to get some air, and then a man in a black car yelling, chasing. Noah had run, losing himself in the city's underbelly. He said he'd take me away if I didn't do what he wanted," Noah stammered, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. Nia's jaw tightened. She knew the streets, knew the predators who lurked in them, but a billionaire's son being targeted? This wasn't random. She glanced at the door, half expecting the SUV to roll up. "You're safe here, Noah, I promise." She handed him a cup of hot cocoa, watching as he sipped it, his hands shaking less with each gulp. The shelter's phone rang, shrill against the storm's hum. Nia answered, her voice firm. "Hope Center, this is Nia." She relayed Noah's situation to the police, giving them the address. But something in her gut told her to stay vigilant. She locked the door, dimmed the lights, and sat beside Noah, her presence a quiet shield. "Tell me about your dad," she said, coaxing him to talk, to keep his fear at bay. Noah's eyes softened. "He's busy, always working. Since Mom," his voice cracked, and Nia understood. The papers had covered James Bennett's tragedy, his wife's death from cancer 2 years ago. Noah was carrying that loss, and now this. "You're brave, Noah. Nia said, brushing a wet strand of hair from his forehead. Running like that? Most kids wouldn't make it this far. Her words drew a small, proud smile from him, the first crack in his fear. Noah shook his head, but Nia caught a flicker of recognition in Victor's eyes, quickly masked. Probably some opportunistic thug, Victor said, leaning casually against a fireplace. Chicago's not what it used to be. But don't worry, James. I've already alerted our security team to look into it. Nia's stomach twisted. Victor's words were too smooth, his concern too rehearsed. She remembered the black SUV idling in the alley, its headlights predatory. Noah said the man mentioned something about doing what he wanted, she said, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. That doesn't sound random to me. James's eyes snapped to hers, searching. You think this was targeted? I think it's worth looking into, Nia said, choosing her words carefully. Noah's not just any kid. He's your son. Victor chuckled, a sound that grated like broken glass. With all due respect, Miss Johnson, you're a social worker, not a detective. Let's leave this to the professionals. Nia bristled but held her tongue. She'd faced dismissal before. Her work with street kids often met with skepticism from those who saw her as just another bleeding heart. But something about Victor's tone, his too quick deflection, set her nerves on edge. She glanced at James, hoping for an ally, but his expression was unreadable, caught between gratitude and suspicion. I should go, Nia said, rising. Noah's safe now. That's what matters. She knelt beside the boy, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. You're gonna be okay, sweetheart. You're strong. Noah's lip trembled. Will I see you again? Nia's heart caught. I hope so. She stood, meeting James's gaze. If you need me, I'm at the Hope Center. James nodded, but his silence spoke volumes. As Nia stepped back into the drizzle, the weight of his doubt pressed against her. She'd saved his son, yet she felt like a suspect. Unseen by Nia, Victor lingered in the foyer, his phone pressed to his ear. She's leaving, he murmured. Start the plan. Make it clean. His smile returned as he rejoined James, but his mind was elsewhere, spinning a web of deceit. Victor had been planning for weeks, orchestrating a move to pressure James into signing a billion-dollar contract with a shady offshore firm. Noah's abduction was meant to be a warning, a flex of power, but Nia's interference had complicated things. She'd seen too much, and Victor couldn't afford loose ends. Back at her small apartment, Nia sat at her kitchen table, the rain tapping against the window. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through news articles about James Bennett's company. A headline caught her eye. Bennett Tech faces pressure over controversial deal. The article mentioned Victor Lang, a key advisor pushing for expansion. Nia's gut churned. She opened her laptop, digging deeper, her fingers flying across the keys. Public records showed Victor's name tied to shell companies, whispers of fraud, and a history of ruthless ambition. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find a courier, his cap dripping. Nia Johnson? He handed her an envelope, unmarked but heavy. Inside was a USB drive and a note. Stay out of this, or you'll regret it. Her pulse raced. She plugged in the USB, her screen filling with files, schematics of Bennett Tech's proprietary software, stamped with her name. Forged, incriminating. Nia's breath hitched. Someone was setting her up, and Victor's cold smile flashed in her mind. She'd saved Noah, but at what cost? The rain outside grew heavier, as if Chicago itself were warning her of the storm to come. The fluorescent lights of the Chicago police station buzzed like a swarm of angry wasps, casting a harsh glow over Nia Johnson's face. Her radiant brown skin seemed dulled by exhaustion, her long, wavy black hair pulled back into a tight bun as she sat handcuffed in an interrogation room. At 28, Nia had faced her share of hard nights working with street kids, but nothing prepared her for this. A cold metal chair, a one-way mirror, and the weight of accusations that could steal 5 years of her life. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from fury. She'd saved a child, and now she was the villain. The door swung open, and Detective Carla Ruiz entered, her face a mask of professional detachment. She dropped a file onto the table, its contents spilling out. A USB drive with Nia's fingerprints, bank records showing a $50,000 deposit in her name, and grainy security footage placing her near Bennett Tech's servers. Nia Johnson, Ruiz began, her voice clipped. You're under arrest for theft of proprietary data and conspiracy to kidnap Noah Bennett. Care to explain? Nia's dark eyes flashed. I didn't steal anything, and I'd never hurt Noah. I saved him. Check the police report from that night. Margaret Caldwell, Ethan's mother, sat to her right, her silver hair pinned tightly, her emerald dress as unyielding as her resolve. At 60, she carried the authority of a retired teacher who'd never lost a battle, her pale blue eyes glinting with contempt. You're a disgrace, Nia, she spat, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. A gold digger who thought she could ruin my son with her cheap affairs. The words were venom, each syllable a deliberate wound, painting Nia as the villain in a story Margaret had already written. Nia's hands clenched in her lap, her navy skirt creasing under her grip. I didn't cheat, she said, her voice steady but trembling at the edges, her dark eyes burning with unshed tears. I've been nothing but loyal to Ethan, to our children. The lawyer, a gaunt man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like rustling paper, adjusted a stack of documents, his expression neutral but impatient. Mrs. Johnson, the terms are clear, he droned. No claim to Mr. Caldwell's assets. Limited alimony for 1 year. And if you contest, Mrs. Caldwell has threatened to pursue custody of Amara and Elijah. The mention of her children's names was a knife to Nia's heart, twisting with every syllable. Amara's crayon note, Mommy, you're my hero, flashed in her mind, alongside Elijah's chubby hands, clutching her own. Losing them was unthinkable, a pain sharper than Margaret's cruelty or Ethan's indifference. Ethan sat beside her, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his hazel eyes fixed on the desk as if it held answers he couldn't face. Nia glanced at him, her heart pleading for him to speak, to defend her against this lie born from a misinterpreted moment at the library. But he was a statue, his jaw tight, his silence louder than Margaret's accusations. Ethan, please, Nia whispered, her voice breaking, barely audible over the hum of the office's air conditioning. Tell them it's not true. He shifted, his hand twitching as if to reach for hers, but it stayed limp, a betrayal that cut deeper than words. It's just a formality, Nia, he muttered, his voice hollow, avoiding her gaze. Let's get this over with. Margaret's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. You heard him, she said, leaning forward, her manicured nails tapping the desk. Sign the papers, Nia. Spare us the drama of your lies. You're not fit for this family, never were. The words were a lash, stripping away Nia's dignity, her blackness, her modest roots weaponized against her. She thought of the dinner 3 nights ago, Margaret's public accusation at the mansion, the guest's whispers, Ethan's silence. Now in this cold office, the weight of it all pressed down, suffocating her. I'm not lying, Nia said louder now, her voice a mix of hurt and defiance. I've given everything to this marriage for Amara, for Elijah, for Ethan. I won't sign something that says I'm a cheat. Her tears spilled, hot against her cheeks, but she held her head high, her strength a fragile armor. She thought of her children's laughter, the way Amara's curls bounced when she danced, the way Elijah's tiny hand fit perfectly in hers. Signing meant admitting to a lie, surrendering her truth. Refusing meant risking a legal battle Margaret could win with her wealth and influence. You're making a mistake, Margaret hissed, her eyes narrowing. I'll make sure you lose everything. Your children, your home, your dignity. The threat was a cold wind, chilling Nia's bones, but she clung to the spark of defiance within her, fanned by the love for her kids. The lawyer cleared his throat, sliding the papers closer. You have 24 hours to sign, or we proceed with Mrs. Caldwell's terms, he said, his tone clinical, as if Nia's life were just another case file. Nia stared at the signature line, her hand trembling as she gripped a pen, its weight heavier than the wedding band on her finger. She saw Ethan's face in their early days, laughing over coffee, promising forever. That man was gone, replaced by this stranger who let his mother tear her apart. Why does it have to be like this? She asked, her voice a whisper, raw with pain. Ethan looked away, his silence a final betrayal. Nia stood, her legs unsteady but her resolve firm. I won't sign without proof, she said, her voice cutting through the room's tension. I'm not what you think I am. Margaret's face hardened, her victory delayed but not denied. You'll regret this, she said, her voice low, a promise of more pain to come. Nia walked out, the glass doors closing behind her. The sea's roar a distant echo of her own turmoil. Her tears dried in the salty air, but her heart was a battlefield, love for her children warring with the agony of betrayal. She was Nia Johnson, a mother, a woman, a fighter. And though the weight of Margaret's cruelty and Ethan's silence threatened to break her, she would not bend. Not yet. The Camden Library was a haven of whispers and worn pages, its oak shelves bathed in the soft glow of morning light filtering through salt-streaked windows. Nia Johnson, 28, stood behind the circulation desk, her dark skin radiant despite the shadows beneath her eyes. Her long, wavy black hair loose over her shoulders, a stark contrast to the storm within. Her hands moved mechanically, scanning books for a group of schoolchildren, their chatter a fleeting distraction from the weight of the past week. Margaret's venomous accusation at the Caldwell mansion, branding her a cheat, and the lawyer's office showdown, with its divorce papers and threats to take Amara and Elijah, lingered like a bruise on her heart. Yet Nia's smile held firm, a mask of strength for the kids who saw her as their storybook hero. Even as her world teetered on the edge of collapse, her fingers brushed a stack of returned books, each one a reminder of the life she'd built for her children. Amara, with her boundless energy, and Elijah with his trusting gaze. But Ethan's silence in that sterile office, his refusal to defend her against his mother's lies, had cracked something deep within her. She'd forgiven his betrayals before. Texts from Jessica, the hotel receipt, the whiskey-scented nights. But the memory of his indifference now fueled a quiet fire. As she shelved a copy of Charlotte's Web, a conversation drifted from the break room, sharp and careless. Heard Ethan Caldwell's been at the Norumbega again, a colleague murmured, her voice low but clear. With that blonde from his office. Jessica, right? They're not exactly discreet. Nia froze, her heart lurching, the book slipping from her hand with a soft thud. The words were a spark, igniting the suspicions she'd buried for her children's sake. Her pulse raced as she slipped into the break room, pretending to refill her coffee, her ears straining. Yeah, saw them at the bar last week, another colleague said. He's spending like he owns the place. Nia's breath hitched, her mind flashing to the $450 hotel receipt. The late nights Ethan claimed were client meetings. She returned to the desk, her hands trembling, the library's warmth now suffocating. Ethan had left his phone at home that morning, a rare oversight, and it sat in her purse like a ticking bomb. She hesitated, her love for him warring with the need for truth, but the sting of Margaret's accusations and Ethan's silence pushed her forward. In the quiet of the library's back office, Nia unlocked his phone, her fingers shaking as she opened his messages. The screen lit up with a flood of text from Jessica, flirtatious, intimate, laced with plans for dinners and weekends away. Photos followed. Ethan and a blonde woman laughing in a candlelit restaurant, her hand on his arm. Receipts in his email confirmed stays at the Norumbega, dates matching his absences. The evidence was a tidal wave, drowning the fragile hope Nia had clung to. Her knees buckled and she sank into a chair, tears burning her eyes, not just for the betrayal, but for the years she'd spent forgiving him, believing love could mend what he broke. Her children's faces, Amara's crayon note, Elijah's giggles, flashed in her mind, and the pain hardened into resolve. That evening, their small Camden home was a cocoon of warmth, Amara and Elijah asleep upstairs, their soft snores a reminder of why Nia fought. Ethan walked in at 9, his tie loosened, his hazel eyes glazed with the faint scent of bourbon. Nia stood in the kitchen, her navy sweater hugging her frame, the phone and printed screenshots on the counter like a jury's verdict. We need to talk, she said, her voice steady but sharp, cutting through the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan's brow furrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. What now, Nia? He asked, tossing his jacket over a chair. She slid the phone toward him, the screenshots glaring under the kitchen light. Jessica, she said, her voice low but unyielding. The Norumbega, the dinners, the lies. Ethan's face paled, but his jaw tightened, defiance replacing surprise. You went through my phone, he snapped, his tone accusing, as if she were the one at fault. You don't get to turn this on me, Nia said, her voice rising, her tears held back by sheer will. I forgave you before, Ethan. For our kids. But this? You're throwing us away. He leaned against the counter, his laugh cold, cutting. You're not enough to keep me, Nia, he said, his words a blade slicing through her heart. You're a librarian, not my equal. Jessica gets my world. The cruelty stole her breath, but Nia stood taller, her dark eyes blazing. I'm enough for Amara and Elijah, she said, her voice steel, and I won't let you destroy their lives with your lies. She gathered the screenshots, her hands steady now, her resolve a fire kindled by his betrayal. This isn't over, she said, her words a promise, not a plea. As Ethan stormed out, the door slamming behind him, Nia stood alone, the kitchen's warmth a stark contrast to the chill in her bones. She thought of Margaret's accusations, the divorce papers, the threat to her children. The irony was bitter. She'd been branded a cheat while Ethan's sins went unseen. But now with the truth in her hands, Nia felt a shift, a power she hadn't known she possessed. She wouldn't tell Margaret yet. This fight was hers first. For Amara, for Elijah, for the woman she was beneath the pain, Nia would face the storm. The truth was her weapon, and she was ready to wield it. The Caldwell mansion stood like a sentinel against Camden's twilight, its white columns glowing under the fading Maine sun, a monument to wealth and secrets. Inside, the dining room shimmered with opulence, the crystal chandelier casting fractured light across a mahogany table, laden with untouched plates of roasted duck and herb risotto. Nia Johnson, 28, stood at the room's heart, her dark skin radiant against her emerald dress. Her long, wavy black hair swept into an elegant updo that framed her sharp cheekbones. Her eyes, once clouded with doubt, now burned with a quiet fire, fueled by the truth clutched in her trembling hands. A folder of screenshots, texts, and receipts that exposed her husband's betrayal. Tonight, she wasn't the librarian Margaret Caldwell had branded a disgrace. She was a mother, a woman, a force ready to shatter the lies that had caged her. Margaret presided at the table's head, her silver hair pinned tightly, her navy dress as crisp as her authority. At 60, her pale blue eyes glinted with the smug certainty of a woman who'd never questioned her control. Ethan sat to Nia's left, his tailored suit rumpled, his hazel eyes flickering with unease as he sipped a glass of bourbon. The room was silent save for the clink of silverware and the distant crash of waves, the tension thick as fog rolling off the Atlantic. Margaret's voice broke the quiet, her tone laced with false warmth. Nia, how's the library? Still keeping you busy with those children's books? The jab was familiar, a reminder of Nia's place outside their world. But tonight, it only sharpened her resolve. Nia's fingers tightened around the folder, her heart pounding but her voice steady. I'm not here to talk about the library, she said, her words cutting through the room's pretense. She slid the folder across the table, its contents spilling out. Screenshots of Ethan's texts with Jessica, photos of them laughing in a candlelit restaurant, receipts from the Norumbega. This is about Ethan's lies. The room froze, the chandelier's light catching the papers like a spotlight. Margaret's fork paused midair, her face draining of color. Ethan's glass clinked against the table, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing, his silence a confession. Nia's voice rose, steady but raw with years of buried pain. I forgave you, Ethan, twice, maybe 3 times, because I wanted Amara and Elijah to have a father. I wanted us to be a family. Her eyes locked on his, searching for the man who'd once promised her forever. But you threw us away for her. You let your mother call me a cheat, a disgrace while you hid this. She gestured to the papers, her tears held back by sheer will. I'm done carrying your lies. Ethan's face twisted, a mix of guilt and defiance. You went through my phone, he muttered, his voice low, as if her discovery was the crime. You don't understand my world, Nia. Margaret's eyes darted over the evidence, her composure cracking like thin ice. This "This can't be right," she stammered, her voice thin, almost pleading. She snatched a screenshot, her hands trembling as she read Ethan's words to Jessica. "Nia's not enough. You get me." The betrayal hit her like a wave, her son's duplicity rewriting the narrative she'd clung to. "Ethan," she whispered, her gaze shifting to him. "Is this true?" He shrugged, his nonchalance a slap. "It's not a big deal, Mom. Nia's blowing it out of proportion." The room gasped, the air electric with the weight of his admission. Nia stood taller, her emerald dress a quiet rebellion. "I'm not blowing anything out of proportion," she said, her voice steel, her dark eyes blazing. "I'm done being your scapegoat, Ethan. And Margaret, I'm done letting you paint me as less because of my skin, my job, my love for my children." She turned to Margaret, her words a blade. "You called me a gold digger, threatened to take my kids, but your son's the one who betrayed us all." The truth hung heavy, reshaping the room's power. Margaret's face crumpled, her hands clutching the table, the weight of her misjudgment dawning. Ethan looked away, his silence deafening, his cowardice laid bare. "I'll sign your papers," Nia said, her voice calm but unyielding. "But not because you forced me, Margaret. Because I deserve better than a man who thinks I'm not enough. Because Amara and Elijah deserve a mother who knows her worth." She opened the folder, pulling out the divorce papers from the lawyer's office, her pen hovering over the signature line. Each stroke was a release, a shedding of the pain she'd carried for too long. Margaret's eyes widened, her mouth opening, but no words came. Ethan stared at the table, his hands clenched, unable to meet her gaze. As Nia signed, her tears fell, not from weakness, but from the freedom of letting go. She thought of Amara's crayon note, Elijah's tiny hand in hers, the life she'd fight for alone. "This is for them," she said softly, sliding the signed papers across the table. She turned to leave, her heels echoing on the marble floor, the chandelier's light fading behind her. Margaret's voice, small and broken, called out, "Nia, wait!" But Nia didn't stop. The sea roared outside, its wildness mirroring the fire in her veins. She was no longer the woman who'd begged for trust in that sterile office. She was Nia Johnson, a mother, a survivor, and the truth had set her free. The late summer breeze swept through Camden's quiet streets, carrying the scent of salt and pine to the small sunlit apartment Nia Johnson now called home. At 28, her dark skin glowed with a resilience hard-won, her long, wavy black hair falling loose over her shoulders, framing eyes that held both scars and hope. The apartment was modest, its walls adorned with Amara's finger paintings and Elijah's crayon scribbles, a tapestry of love woven from chaos. Gone was the shadow of the Caldwell mansion, its chandeliers and cold judgments. Here, in this cozy haven, Nia was rebuilding, not just a home, but herself. The divorce papers, signed in defiance at that final confrontation, lay tucked in a drawer, a talisman of her liberation from Ethan's betrayal and Margaret's prejudice. Yet the weight of those days lingered, a quiet ache beneath her newfound strength. Each morning, Nia woke to the giggles of Amara, 4, and Elijah, 2, their tiny feet pattering across the hardwood floor. She'd braid Amara's curls, laughing as the girl recounted her preschool adventures, and wipe oatmeal from Elijah's cheeks, his grin a mirror of her own. The library remained her sanctuary, its shelves a refuge where she read to children, their eager faces reminding her of her purpose. But the wounds of Ethan's infidelity, his cruel words, "You're not enough," and Margaret's accusations still stung. Nia had signed the papers not for them, but for Amara and Elijah, to give them a mother who stood tall. Now she was learning to stand for herself too, each step a reclaiming of the woman she'd nearly lost. One crisp September afternoon, as Nia arranged a display of children's books, a flyer caught her eye. A community group for women, offering support and connection. She hesitated, her fingers tracing Amara's crayon note in her pocket. "Mommy, you're my hero." The library had been her shield, but she craved more, a space to heal. That evening, she joined the group at a local cafe, its warm lights and chatter a balm to her guarded heart. The women shared stories of loss, resilience, and hope, their voices weaving a tapestry Nia felt part of. She spoke haltingly of Ethan's betrayal, Margaret's cruelty, and her fight to keep her children. Their nods, their gentle touches, reminded her she wasn't alone. Days turned to weeks, and Nia poured herself into her new life. She launched a reading program at the library, Stories by the Sea, where kids from Camden's underserved neighborhoods gathered to hear tales of courage and dreams. Their wide eyes, their laughter, mirrored Amara's and Elijah's, grounding Nia in a purpose deeper than pain. She'd catch herself smiling, truly smiling, as a shy boy read aloud for the first time, his voice trembling with pride. The work was her anchor, a reminder that her worth wasn't tied to Ethan's lies or Margaret's disdain. Yet nights were harder when the kids slept and silence pressed in, whispering doubts about her future. One rainy afternoon, as Nia locked the library, a shadow appeared at her door. Margaret Caldwell, her navy coat damp, her silver hair slightly askew, stood with an expression Nia hadn't seen. Vulnerable, almost broken. "Nia," she said, her voice soft, "I need to talk." Nia's heart tightened, but she nodded, leading her to a nearby bench under a dripping awning. Margaret's eyes, once cold, glistened with regret. "I was wrong," she said, her words halting. "About you, about Ethan. I let my prejudice blind me. I'm sorry." The apology was a crack in the armor of the woman who'd called her a disgrace, but Nia felt no triumph, only a weary relief. "I forgive you," she said, her voice steady, "but I need space. For me, for my kids." Margaret nodded, her shoulders sagging, and left, her figure fading into the rain. The apology, though late, lightened Nia's burden, but it didn't erase the past. She focused on her children, on the life she was building. One evening at a library event, she met Daniel Harper, a 30-year-old teacher with warm brown eyes and a laugh that cut through the room's hum. He'd brought his students to her reading program, his easy humor drawing smiles from the kids. "You're a natural," he said, helping her stack chairs, his voice kind but unguarded. "These kids light up around you." Nia blushed, unused to praise that felt sincere. They talked about books, teaching, the way kids saw the world, and Nia felt a spark, not of romance but of possibility, a hint of a future untainted by betrayal. Back home, Nia stood before her mirror, her hair loose, her reflection a study in strength and scars. She wore a simple sweater, but her eyes held a fire that hadn't been there months ago. Amara's laughter echoed from the living room, Elijah's toy cars clattering. Nia smiled, her heart swelling with a truth she was beginning to believe. She was enough. The divorce papers, Margaret's apology, Ethan's lies. They were chapters closed, lessons learned. Daniel's kindness, the community group, the children at her readings. They were new pages, unwritten but bright with hope. As she tucked Amara and Elijah into bed, their small hands clutching hers, Nia whispered a promise. "We're going to be okay," she said, her voice soft but sure. She kissed their foreheads, their warmth her anchor. The sea roared outside, its rhythm echoing her own, a pulse of resilience, of a woman stepping into her power. Nia Johnson was no longer defined by the Caldwell's world. She was a mother, a healer, a force, and her story was hers to write. The spring sun spilled over Camden's Penobscot Park, painting the ancient oaks with golden light as laughter echoed across the grass. Nia Johnson, now 29, stood beneath a canopy of blooming dogwoods, her dark skin radiant, her long, wavy black hair braided loosely, swaying as she adjusted a paper crown on Amara's head. The park buzzed with the chaos of a fifth birthday party. Amara's, a whirlwind of balloons, cupcakes, and children chasing bubbles. Elijah III toddled after his sister, his tiny hands clutching a sparkler that flickered like Nia's newfound joy. The modest apartment they called home was miles away, but here, in this moment, Nia felt the weight of the past. Ethan's betrayal, Margaret's cruelty, the divorce papers, dissolve like mist. She was no longer the woman who'd begged for trust in a sterile lawyer's office. She was a mother, a survivor, a woman who'd built a family on her own terms. The park was alive with color, red streamers fluttering, a table piled with gifts, and Amara's giggles as she led a game of tag. Nia's heart swelled, her eyes tracing her daughter's curls so like her own, bouncing with every step. Elijah perched on a picnic blanket, smeared frosting on his cheeks, his grin a mirror of hers. The divorce, finalized months ago, had been a painful birth, but it delivered freedom. The papers, still tucked in a drawer, were a relic of a time when she let love blind her to her worth. Now, as she watched her children play, Nia knew her value was in their laughter, in the life she'd carved from the wreckage of Ethan's lies. Daniel Harper, the teacher with warm brown eyes, arrived with a bright blue balloon tied to a gift bag. At 30, his easy smile and faded jeans made him a natural in the chaos of kids and cake. He'd become a fixture in Nia's life since their meeting at the library's reading program. His kindness a steady presence, not demanding, but constant. "Looks like Amara's ruling the park," he said, handing Nia a lemonade, his laugh cutting through the chatter. She smiled, her fingers brushing his as she took the cup, a spark of warmth igniting in her chest. Daniel didn't know the full weight of her past, Ethan's infidelity, Margaret's accusations, but he saw her, not as a victim, but as the woman who lit up a room with her strength. The party unfolded in joyful bursts, Amara blowing out candles, Elijah clapping sticky hands, friends from Nia's community group sharing stories over cupcakes. The women from the group, who'd held her through tears months ago, now toasted her resilience, their warmth a reminder of the family she'd found beyond blood. Nia's Stories by the Sea program had grown, drawing kids from across Camden, their faces a daily echo of Amara's curiosity and Elijah's mischief. Teaching them, reading tales of brave heroes, was her calling, a legacy of love she'd built from the ashes of her marriage. A shadow appeared at the park's edge, Margaret Caldwell, her navy coat out of place among the bright balloons. Since her apology, she'd kept her distance, sending occasional gifts for the children, but respecting Nia's boundaries. Today she held a wrapped package, her silver hair catching the sun, her face softer than Nia remembered. "For Amara," she said quietly, handing over a book of fairy tales. "I won't stay." Nia nodded, her forgiveness genuine but firm. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady, no longer seeking Margaret's approval. The older woman lingered a moment, her eyes tracing Amara's laughter, then turned away, a ghost of the past fading into the crowd. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows, Daniel joined Nia on a bench, Elijah dozing in her lap. "You've built something incredible," he said, his voice soft, his gaze on the children. "They're lucky to have you." Nia's throat tightened, not with pain but with gratitude. Daniel's presence was a quiet gift. No grand promises, just a steadiness that felt like home. He joined her at library events, helped Amara with crafts, and made Elijah laugh with silly faces. He saw her heart, not her scars, and in his eyes she saw a future untainted by betrayal. Nia stood, Elijah in her arms, and called Amara over. The girl ran, her paper crown askew, and threw her arms around her mother. "Mommy, you're the best," she declared, her voice a melody. Nia laughed, her eyes glistening, and hugged her tight. "You're my hero too," she whispered, kissing her forehead. She looked at Daniel, his smile warm, and felt her heart settle. This was family, messy, vibrant, built on love, not contracts or approval. As the party wound down, Nia gathered the kids' gifts, her braids swaying, her spirit light. The divorce papers, once a cage, were now a reminder of her strength. Ethan's world, with its wealth and lies, was a distant memory. Margaret's prejudice, though softened, no longer defined her. With Amara's hand in hers, Elijah's weight in her arms, and Daniel's quiet support beside her, Nia walked into the sunset, the park's laughter fading behind them. The sea roared, its rhythm her own, a pulse of freedom, of a woman who'd found her true family in the heart she'd fought to reclaim. Nia Johnson's journey, from the sting of betrayal to the triumph of self-worth, reminds us that true family is built on love, not judgment. Her courage in facing Ethan's lies and Margaret's prejudice speaks to the strength we all carry within. What did Nia's story stir in you? A moment of resilience, a spark of hope, or a lesson in standing tall? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Your voice keeps this tale alive. A heartfelt thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. Your support lights the way for more stories. Subscribe to catch the next chapter of Courage and Heart, and we'll see you soon, shining brighter than ever.